Hi, thanks for joining me. Welcome to Wednesdays live at 5, at least 5 Eastern Standard Time. Whenever you're watching this, I appreciate it. I appreciate the comments and the feedback and all of that. I need to turn on Do Not Disturb so my phone doesn't and computer does not make those wacky noises. Have you ever done that? Like been in a meeting and forgot to turn on Do Not Disturb, or you're in a meeting with someone and they haven't turned on Do Not Disturb, and it's like ping, 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 and all over the place. So, professional advice here, as well as maybe mom advice, when you're going on with anybody, or if you're on live, or whatever you're doing that is going to be, well, a reflection of your attention, go ahead and hit that Do Not Disturb. There's nothing that's going to be that important in that time. And it can sometimes lead to, feeling distracted or bad that you didn't do it in the first place. I think it's just a kind and considerate action to take, especially if you're on an interview, or if you're on a meeting with your supervisor or your boss, because it just shows that you're proactive and you want to be present and all that. That is not what I planned on talking about today. So, the title of this is, I don't know, menopause something. And the irony there is, the name of it is somewhat intended for interest and all that kind of stuff because it connects with the podcast that came out today. But I'm always open to whatever questions you have about intuition, guidance, coaching. If I can help with any kind of directional aspect, I'm happy to do that in real time. Kind of hard to do afterwards. And just wanted to pop on and be here for people. It feels like we have such a busy and somewhat isolating lifestyle. Although some of you may be like, I just want 5 minutes to myself, Vicki. And I remember those days of wanting 5 minutes from the kids, from the husband, from work, all that. So I can appreciate that too. But it feels like we spend so much time distracted and not present that part of my intention for this was to show up and to be present as much as possible. And whatever topic comes up, comes up. So this week, the podcast is about menopause and perimenopause. I am not a doctor. I am not a therapist, a medical professional. I am a person who has recently gone through it. You'd consider still in it, I guess. I don't know. It's the process is such a long one. And once I started doing my own research, I got really frustrated that there wasn't a lot of information and there wasn't a lot of money allocated towards researching it. And then I realized that it's not something that was ever discussed in my house. Well, you didn't talk about much in my house, but my mother, if I do the timeline right, would have been absolutely in the throes of it when I was a teenager. And had we known about it, I don't know, I feel like I could have been a little bit more compassionate to understand to try to understand. Couldn't really, but I was a pretty cool teenager. I might have tried. But when I look back on it, I think, wow, she was really in the midst of it after still in the process of raising her seventh and eighth kid. Like, no wonder the woman was tired. No wonder she had no attention, because having been through it for the last 10 years and then starting officially in the menopause direction, it is like body snatchers come in and take your brain. It just feels like that. It's similar. I think I used to joke about this with my teenagers that something came in and took their brain, and someday I hope it returns. And it did. I'm happy to say that having that patience and having that awareness actually occurred to me when I was like, my brain does not feel like my brain. I was no longer actually able to focus and get projects done, and felt like I was all over the map and didn't know what direction I wanted to head in for work. or personal life or any of it. And I work with a lot of women who are in this age group. So those of us who are late 30s on up to, late 50s, because I'm told I'm a late bloomer in this regard, because I am older to just start going through the menopause process. But perimenopause is 10 up to 10 to 12 years before you even get to the menopause place. And there's more talk that's happening now, but I would love to connect it to the spiritual connection, like the power and the gift that it really can be if it's not demonized or seen as something that is wrong with you. And that, I think, can only happen with some education and with some awareness that, all right, we are physical vessels and we are going to go through this. And there is a process that men go through too. During the same period, they haven't had the menses up to that, but there is a drop in testosterone and there is a focus issue and stuff that is true. And that doesn't get talked about either. And I think it's just time to get rid of the stigma of discussing our physical selves, because you are a soul who chose a physical self. So I am a soul who chose to be in physical form. So by doing that, I feel like I owe it not only to myself, but to my soul to pay attention to what's going on and then to educate. And then I have a lot of younger women in my life, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell them about this, because for the longest time, thought I was losing my marbles. I thought, oh, this is it. I've dealt with so much stress in my life that it's finally come to a breaking point, and I don't know how I'm going to manage this. And then something within me said, could we check the hormones? Because it likely is something along those lines. But because my physical self was still continuing every month to have an experience, I hadn't considered it yet. So my intuition, thankfully, was knocking me on my forehead to say, you need to pay attention to this. And then when I was working with clients, I could feel the hormonal imbalance that was going on. And I'm like, okay, this feels very familiar. And then it was empowering for them to learn and for myself to learn along with them. What could we do holistically to help with this process? And you know what it started with? It started with embracing it. It started with feeling like this is something I've earned. This is a blessing because you're still here physically. So you get to experience it. I think any day that we are physical is a blessing. And it also is a place of empowerment, because a lot of people, not all, but a lot of people, when they're going through this, will have, if they've had kids, their kids will be older and will be more independent. But those who are, I think it's remarkably important to point out to those who would be going through this in their late 30s into 40s, and they've had their children in their late 30s and into 40s, you're still going to be going through this. So imagine if you understood, no, you don't suck as a mother. You have amazing but humongous effects that are happening within your body, and especially coming off of childbirth. There's a lot to be said for that. And if you've adopted children, you're still tired, right? Like you're still going through this process. I feel like as the energy of the universe becomes more feminine based, not in gender, but in energy, more fluid, more access levels of emotions, that we need to take into consideration how that's going to affect us, but to also embrace this, like embrace the fact that you're becoming less tolerant of BS, because that's one of the very cool side effects. Embrace the fact that you're more interested in your intuition. Why am I more interested? All of a sudden, I want to listen to myself. And I see people take like negative or the sharp approach to this, that they have earned their stripes or this or and get cranky about it. We don't have to do that. We can embrace the fact that this is a process and it doesn't all shine with glory. Some of it kind of stinks. You know what the worst part for me was? Um, my tendons, they just hurt. And it wasn't related to a workout I had done or if my electrolytes weren't in a great place. They just hurt. And I remember saying to my doctor, I feel like this is hormonally based. And I love her. And she's in her early 30s. And we've since had a conversation about she needs to listen to this because she's going to be in this position too. And doctors are just not given a lot of training in this, like very little training in this. So we have to be the advocates for ourselves. And, any male presenting person that's watching this, you need to advocate for the females in your life too, because this is a really significant thing and it can impact relationships because you start to feel like a slug and you start to feel like you just can't do anything right. And not everybody has the same experience, but I've worked with enough women and I've been through it myself to know that there are some commonalities. The itchy ears. Anybody get the itchy ears? Goodness gracious. That one, when I connected the dots, was like, okay, that's a little weird, but there's so many people that experience it and at the same, point of their process that it's worth speaking of too. But there's a humongous gift in going through this with consciousness, with an appreciation for your body, with a love for the fact that it's leaving one phase, it's leaving its procreation phase. I just was at the oral surgeon for my first visit, and the woman asked, "Could you be pregnant?" And I'm like, "Woman, you're raising it if I am," because there's a blessing. There's a can be a what's the word, celebration of that phase of my life has passed. And I can speak to this from a place of having raised three kids and not wanting to do it anymore. I can also understand that this has been a desire for someone and they've not been it, that this might not be the most joyful process. So we get to know who we are. We get to know that we get to access our intelligence and to feel that wisdom and to be proud of being the elder while having the vitality and everything. Um, so comment is the inflamed, enlarged midsections while the legs are toned, chest and face are normal. Yeah, I got the Buddha belly going on. I've always had a belly. But I will say that was one of the things I said to my doctor when I said, I actually said to him, it's called HRT because if you don't get me some, I'm going to hurt someone. And I said to him, I've always had like the fupa. I've never had this tire, which I have now. And I work out a lot and I eat really well. But there's a gift too in acknowledging, okay, I may not love that, and I will take steps to create the integration within my body. I've started thanking my belly and saying, I'm so grateful that you protect my organs, that I'm harder to kidnap because I'm heavier, and really bringing the humor to it and being really appreciative of the fact that once I accept and love who I am, I feel like I know the body listens. And I don't know about you, but I'm done fighting it. I feel like releasing that is a gift. And maybe we could do this hand gesture. Releasing that is this gift I give to myself. And I would love for people to be able to experience that at every point in their life, because isn't part of why we're here, at least from my belief, is to learn to love and like ourselves. And that includes when going through this place that it feels like the brain has been kidnapped. And one of the things I'm really enjoying right now is having the conversations with other people as I bring this subject up, and we're sharing the brain fog. But here's a fun thing. Yes, there is a tendency as your hormones shift and energy is being diverted to different places to like lose words to things. But did you also know that that's part of the intuitive expansion process? It is. When we, you just know or YouTube is going to freeze on that face I just made, right? But when we expand and start using our energy field more, which tends to be a little bit more accessible as we age, you start to actually shift things around in an intuitive sense too. So those labels that are on things can become mm, like, well, to stay with the metaphor, mislabeled. So you have a difficult time coming up with that thing, that thingamajig, the whoozy what's it. I said whoozy what's it for a couple of years. I'm like, it's just the whoozy what's it. And then I started really kind of being tough on myself. Like, do I just not care? Am I not paying attention? Have I lost some IQ points? And then I realized I could feel in my head almost like there was a moving crew in there and they were moving furniture around. And then I thought, I know what this is in an intuitive practice. What is going on for me in a health practice? And I just realized that it's much more important for me in order to access those words, to not beat myself up about it. And my dad chose to cross through the process of Alzheimer's. And some of my siblings, I've heard them say this, and they are much older than I am, but I've heard them say about their fear of having Alzheimer's. And I'm like, this isn't Alzheimer's. This is a shift in your hormones. And this is also a shift in your intuition. And be mindful that if other things are showing up that we have to attend to it. But it's very common no matter how old you are. So those of you nowhere near this age group, no matter, and if you've made it this far into the video considering the subject, like no matter how old you are, once you start accessing your clear cognizance, the clear knowing, and clairvoyance, clear seeing, it tends to also rearrange your brain cells a little bit. So have some humor with it. Make sure you're well hydrated and that sorry, got a ruckus going on in the other room. It's cat feeding time and they're starting to revolt. So just keep that in mind and get excited about the fact that you may have lost a word connection. What I would want you to do at that point is when you lose that word, get in there. No, don't get in there because that's going to feel like you got to get in there. Relax, take some breaths, and ask for a picture of what it is that you were describing. I couldn't come up with lamp. I said that glowy thing in the corner. And in the past, again, I would have beat myself up for it. I would have felt like I was becoming stupid in the head. And I've just decided thingamajig, whoozy, what's it, and you know what I'm talking about are phrases that I'm going to use. But if you can not beat yourself up for it, if you can relax and say, just give me a moment. I've used that with people too. I'll say, can't find the word I mean. Give me a moment. And most people are willing to wait. And I feel like the more that we can embrace all the changes that we go through in life and the gift of having a physical body and the gift of having an awareness that your physical body is going through something. I want to change the message around beating ourselves up for these suits that we're wearing. and bring to it more of an embracing of each experience. Um, have I experienced low blood pressure or changes as a result of this process? I have not. I am steady Eddie. I'm like 112/70. Um, what I've noticed though, and I wonder if that's what you're talking about, what I have noticed is moments that feel like um, almost a disorientation, like a low blood pressure, like your blood pressure has dropped. I have noticed those. Here's another, we'll call it fun thing. That also happens when you're assimilating psychic energy. So for me, it actually took me a while to realize that some of this was a physiological change because I'm such a healthy horse. It took a little bit for me to realize that these were changes because it mimics so much the psychic and intuitive expansion. Um, so personally, no, my experience has been more, I experienced anxiety for the first time in my life. I did not know what that was in the past, like that feeling of anxiousness. Of course, I've been nervous. Of course, I've been scared, but I had anxiousness where everything in my life was going amazingly and I couldn't figure it out. And previously, if I had had that feeling, it meant that there was danger coming. So figuring out all of the nuances to this and then tossing in a physiological response can seem overwhelming, and that's why I want to draw the correlation between some of the symptoms, some of the experiences. We don't necessarily have to make them symptoms, but some of the experiences of perimenopause and menopause and intuitive advancement. So, I mean, obviously, check your blood pressure and make sure that it's good to go. I actually just came, like I said, came back from the um, oral surgeon, and they took my blood pressure, and it was like 147/80 something, and I'm like, no, that's not me. And they took it through my clothing and all that, and I'm like, let's try that again. And I wasn't nervous because I knew what we were going for and I knew what it was going to cost. And so I was just happy to meet people. When you work at home by yourself, sometimes even a visit to the oral surgeon is an exciting trip. And she took it again and it was fine. So I think being aware that of what your regular thing is. Are you experiencing it, Jess? Are you experiencing a fluctuation, or is it running in a certain direction? So this is appropriate of a talk about menopause and getting hot. But the sun did come around to the side of the building finally. Um, this is how we do it at Vicky Bear Coaching. Made it. So being conscious of your intuitive self. Much worse lately. Okay. I definitely believe that there's a correlation because as your system slows in other areas, it can slow in that. But I know you'll stay on top of it. But I'm also feeling like an encouragement to talk to the body, talk to your body, and say, not necessary for you to dip below. So you could ask when you're experiencing that feeling, and it is a disconcerting feeling too. When you're experiencing that feeling, you could ask, is this an intuitive hit? Or is this a physical body system? Ask one and wait, and then maybe ask the second one, because it can be a great time of self-awareness if we allow ourselves to be, um, to empower and to feel knowledge and strength. And I also feel like it's like crossing through that next level of adulthood because no matter how old we are, sometimes we can still feel like the child is in charge, or that you don't know what to do, or there's a confusion. There's a certain level of self-surety that can come with this. So, and I wonder if maybe paying attention to your sodium levels and your electrolyte, not a doctor, um, but that's what I'm intuitively hearing right now, is to also pay attention to those, because man, there's a lot of hormones running through our bodies, which is a wonderful thing. So when you're developing any of your intuitive awareness, pay attention to the physical sensations, and then vice versa. You got any physical sensations going on? Ask if there's an emotional blockage. Ask if there's an energy blockage, because the energy can get so trapped up in our system that it acts like a physiological thing when it's actually an emotional or energy block. So it's all connected. And if anybody needs a little bit of support, I'm happy to help. I go into a little bit more in the podcast, but I wanted to show up. And if there's any questions of other topics that you'd like to discuss, I'm happy. I'm here to do it. Intuition development or coaching, career process. I'm here. I'm here. There's no cost. So pop in. We'll chat. Jess, take care. And thanks for showing up. And thanks for all those that popped in. I appreciate it. Happy Wednesday.